In this chapter, we will create a post route where we send the data from the front-end form to our backend SQL server. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, we will need a form. So we can create a form by creating an HTML page. So we will create a new file and name it form.html. And in a form.html, we will create a simple boilerplate. We will change the title to Crud application. In the body, I will create a container. So I will do div.container. And in the container, I will need a form. So we will do a form with a method post. So the basic difference between post and get method is that a post method sends data from the browser to the server, and the get request gets data from the server to the browser. It's really simple. Put yourself in the place of a browser, and if you want any information from the server, you will have to use the get request. And if you have to send data from your browser to the server, you will have to use the post request. That's it. Since we are sending the data from the form to the server, we will use the post request, and the action I will keep it default. In this form, we will have two fields, that is input, where the type is text and value is name. Let's copy this, paste the same, and change the value to email. And to submit this form, we will need a submit button. So we can do that input, submit, and the value is submit. Once you have the form ready, we can link it with the app.js. So we will go to app.js, and in the home route, we will change the res.send to res.send file. So the basic difference between send and send file is that send sends a message that will be displayed on the browser, and in send file, we can send a file that has to be loaded or rendered. So we will do res.send file, and in this file, we will give it a location of the file. And since we are using relative path, our server needs to understand the relative path. So we can start the path from our application folder by giving underscore underscore directory name, that stands for dirname, plus the location of our form, that is route form.html. Once we are done with this, we can save our application and open our terminal. You can also open your terminal by going to terminal and new terminal, and the shortcut for it is Control and tilde. And over here, we will run nodemon app.js, which is our app engine. Once we run this, we can see a message that our server is up and running. So we will open this on our browser. So we can go to the location http localhost colon 3000, where 3000 is our port. In our forms, we have made a small mistake where we set the value and it has to be placeholder. By the way, you can select multiple lines by holding Alt and clicking in front of the line where you want to edit. Placeholder. Let's save it. Go to our application and refresh this page. And yes, now we can type our name properly. Okay, so this is a basic form. We will style it later. So let's go back to our application. So once we have the form ready, we will need to link it with our database. And before that, we will need a database. So if we can fire up XAMPP. If you don't know how to install XAMPP, we have done it in our previous video. You can check that out. So once it's done, we will start MySQL and Apache. And in our MySQL, we will open the admin settings. So this will act as our database. And for this project, we will create a new database. So we will click on new. That's on this side of the screen, on the left side of the screen. And we will give it a name. So we will give it a name test crud and create. This is a GUI where we write SQL commands using a graphical interface. If you're familiar with writing commands, you can do the same by clicking in the console and writing it over here. So we will create a table called test with 3 columns. So the first column will be ID, the second column will be name, and the third column will be the email. So ID is an integer, name will be the varchar, that stands for variable character, and email is also varchar, which stands for variable character. So the length we will specify to 100 each, and ID has to be set to auto increment, as we don't want to write the ID from the backend, and we want the database to increment the ID every time a value is being generated. And once we are done with this, we can save, and our tables are ready. So now we will have to push the data from the front end to these tables. So before that, we will have to establish a connection with our application. So we can do that by creating another file called connection.js. And in our connection.js, we will require SQL module. So we can do that by opening our terminal. Since we have our terminal open over here, let me expand it. And over here, we will open another command prompt. So we will click on the plus icon and we will open a PowerShell. So we will have to install a module called MySQL to interact with the MySQL database. So we can do that by installing a package. So npm I, and the package name is MySQL, all small. So this package will help us interact our Node application with the SQL server. So once this is done, we can close this. And in our connection.js, we will establish a connection. So we can do const MySQL is equal to require, where we'll have to require the module that we just installed. That's MySQL. After this, we will have to configure our database. So in production, it is really important that you secure your API key or your database keys. So for that, we will use a .environment. So we will create another file called .env. So this is our environment file, and over here we will create all the passwords and save all the passwords. So for this, we will have to create 4 variables, that is host, where the host is equal to localhost, since we are locally hosting it on our system. And then we will have to create user. Make sure all these terms are in capital, and the user is root. Password can be empty since we have not set any password. And the database name, this is really very important. This name has to match the XAMPP database that we have just created. So let me go over here and copy this name. Alright, once we are done with the environment file, we will close it and we can require it over here. So we have to require it by saying require .env, because it's a .environment .config. Once we are done configuring it, we can set up a connection by setting var con, which stands short for connection, is equal to mysql dot create connection. And in this connection, we will have to pass all those 4 parameters. So we will set host colon, and we can access the .env variables by saying process .env and the name, that stands for host, comma user and the same process dot user, then password process. It's the same for all. And once we are done with it, all right, there's an error over here. Change it to colon. And yeah, and once we are done with it, we can close this. Now we will have to establish and check if the database is corrected successfully or not. So we can do by con.connect, and we will write another anonymous function with the inner parameter of error, so it can display any error if it occurs. And within it, we will write an if condition. If error, we will tell it to throw the error. And if there is no error, we can console log a message on our terminal just so that we know that our database is connected. So we can say database connected successfully. And once it's done, we will close this and even close the connection. Okay, so now we will have to export this module to our application, so app.js. So we can do that by module.export, and we will give it a name .con. So we are exporting this function to app.js. Let's save this and go to our app.js. And right below where we have created our application, we will establish the connection. So here we will link our app.js with our environment variable that we have created. So we will do require again .env .config. So we have configured our .environment variable, and now we will establish a connection with our database. So we will do var con is equal to require connection. Let's save this. There's an error over here. So cannot find module.env. Okay, this error is because we haven't installed the module.env. So we can go to a PowerShell and install the .env variable. So we can do npm i.env. And once we are done with this, let's resave our application. And there's a typo over here. So it has to be .env. Let's save it. And there's a typo even in our connection. So it has to be .env. All right. So make sure to enter the name properly or else you will find an error. So here we can see that our server is up and running and even our database is connected successfully. So now we can push the data from our front end to the back end. So let's work on that. So we will create a route. This time it will be a post route. So we will do app.post. And in this post, we will give it a route. This is the same home route. And from here, we will write an anonymous function with two parameters, that is request and response. And inside this function, we will get the data from the front end to the back end. So we can do that by importing another module, which is called body parser. Let's go to our terminal, PowerShell, and install another package, that is body parser. So we can do that by npm i body-parser. So what a body parser module does is that it takes the data from a front end, a form, and gets it to the back end where we can process it and send it to our database. So once it's installed, we can close this and we have to link it with our app.js. So that can be done right after establishing a connection. So here we can say const body parser is equal to require body parser. So to keep our code tidy, we will create all the requiring modules in one place. So right under this, yes. And we will establish the .env right after our Express app. Yes. So once we have installed and linked body parser with our page, we will need to create another Express route where it can read the body parser. So we will set app.use where we will set the extended true. Extended :true. That's all. And let's save it. So now we are ready to use our body parser. So first we have to set it up. So let's go to our form.html and give it a name attribute. So the body parser will search for the name tag and from there it will take the data out. So we will give it name is equal to name, and here we will give it a name is equal to email. Let's save this. Go to our app.js and over here we will have to get the data and save it in our variable. So we will do var name is equal to request dot body. We are requesting the body. So we are requesting the data from the body of our HTML dot name. We will do the same for email, where email is equal to request dot body dot email. And we can just test it by doing console log, and in our log we can pass name comma email. Let's close this and we will link it with our form.html. Yes, it's linked. Yes, we can run this application by saving it, opening our terminal and checking, yeah, the database is ready. So let's go to our browser, the Crud application. Let's refresh it and fill in the form. We'll give it my name and an email of test@abc.com. So once I submit this form, a request is being made. Let me go to our code. So here we can see that the name and email that I've entered is being printed. So our body parser is getting the data successfully. So let me close this, go to our app.js. And right below this, we will create an SQL command where we push this data to our SQL table. So we can do that by establishing a connection saying con, which is our connection variable, dot query. And in this, we can write our SQL query. So before that, we will have to create an SQL query. So let's set var SQL is equal to, since we are inserting, we will do insert into test, where test is our XAMPP table name. So in our test CRUD, we have a table called test, so that table name. So we will do insert into test and we will pass the parameter that is name, comma, email. These two names has to match the column names. So let me check it once. So it is username and email. So let me just copy it and paste it over here. So it's username and email. So once we are done with this, we will set values question mark, where we will pass the value from our front end. So we will create another variable values, which is equal to name, comma, email that we have fetched from our front end. Let me close this. And now we can pass it in our con.query. So in our query, first we will pass our SQL statement, after which we will pass our values, and right after our values, we will write a function to check if the database is being accessible. So we will write function, and in this function we will pass two parameters, that is error and result. So if there's an error, we can print it out using the error variable. So once after we are done with it, we will put a condition. So if error, throw error. And if at all there is no error, we can console log a message for the admin saying data uploaded. After the data has been uploaded, we'll have to redirect the user to a page. So we can redirect him to res.redirect. So res.redirect redirects the user to a specified route. So we will redirect him to the home route. And once that's done, we will save it. Go to our form. So let's refresh this page and enter my name and an email, test.com, and let me submit this form. All right, the data has been submitted. So let me check it in our database, and we can check it by going to browse. So over here, we can see that my username and the test is being entered. Let me do another application where we enter Astro and give the email astro@test.com. Let me refresh the page. And here we can see that our Crud application, that is create, is being working perfectly. So that's all for this video. So in our next chapter, we will see how to read the data from our SQL database and print it on our front end.